once you do it, you know you can do it. And so it's a matter of, it sounds like stupid, like obvious, but once you do something like that, you know you can do it. Ball security, it changed my career. I mean, one of the first things he said to me when he became the new head coach was, I don't care how good you are, if you can't hold onto the football, you're not going to play, period. It's the mental side of it. It's like, man, I just don't feel good. Like I get up and I feel every step that I'm taking, and that messes with your mind.
First of all, this is my voice. I'm Tim Green and I have ALS. This podcast is not about ALS or living with disabilities. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for me. I am a father of 5 with a marriage that's lasted for over 33 years. I am a #1 New York Times best-selling author of 41 books, an NFL first-round pick with an 8-year career. I worked on TV for Fox Sports, Good Morning America, Court TV, and Extra. I've hosted BattleBots, A Current Affair, and Find My Family. And I am also a practicing attorney. In this podcast, we're diving into real-life stories. From triumphs to trials, we'll explore the extraordinary in the ordinary. Join me, Tim Green, and my son Troy each week for real conversations, laughter, and insights. Because life is a journey, and everyone's got a story. My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Tiki Barber, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. As you know, we're raising money and awareness for ALS research at Massachusetts General Hospital, where half of the drugs to combat the disease have come from, and a high-profile guest like you keeps the sponsors happy. So thank you again.
It is my pleasure. I love what you are doing. I love your journey. I appreciate the struggle that you're going through, and I'm praying for you, Tim. It's amazing that I'm getting a chance to talk to you in this very unique way. It's awesome.
First of all, Tiki is a nickname. How do you correctly pronounce your given name?
Yes, you're right. Tiki is what everybody knows me as, but it is not my real name. My real name is Atim Kiambu Barber. And my mom and dad knew an exchange student from Zaire, which I think now is the Republic of Congo in Africa. And they named me and my brother. And because we were incubators, we were preemies. And so I was ripping out all my tubes and stuff. And so they named me Fiery Tempered King. There's only, I think, 3 people who call me Atim. My first fullback in the NFL, Greg Camella, Pat Hanlon, and Peter John Baptiste, who were the sports information guys with the New York Giants when I first got there, because they thought that name was cooler than Tiki. My oldest son, is AJ, so he's a team junior. So technically he uses it, but everybody calls him AJ.
Your identical twin, Ronde, was a defensive back who also played at a high level in the NFL. How did that happen, and when did you differentiate yourselves?
That's a good question. So I don't remember exactly when it's happened, but it kind of feels like it always was, that I was the running back and he was the defensive back. But that's a lie, because he actually played offense too. But in high school, he got hurt and broke his collarbone, and then he didn't want to play running back anymore. But I think it happened where I started getting the majority of the carries when we were little, because I was faster and I was stronger and just a little bit tougher, even though as life played on and we went to high school and college, he was always the better athlete. I mean, he led the nation in interceptions as a redshirt freshman at UVA. Obviously, he's in the Hall of Fame now in the NFL and won a Super Bowl and yada, yada, yada. But I was always the more popular one. I was always the more famous one. So he calls me the less accomplished, more famous twin, just because of the position I played.
And the New York media, right?
Exactly right. No, that's probably the biggest thing. The biggest thing is likely the New York media.
What is the story with you having an older brother? I read some places that you have an older brother and other places that you don't.
We didn't have an older brother. That's a Jay Glazer made up story. Jay used to mess with everybody all the time. And for whatever reason, it stuck. We actually do have a younger brother, though. My mom and dad divorced when we were babies, too. My father remarried, and I have a half brother, Jonathan, who lives in Oklahoma. He was a pretty good high school football player as well, but he tore his ACL his senior year, so he lost all of his scholarships or opportunities, and he went to ORU, where my dad, James Barber, who was teammates with Bruce Arians. In fact, he was roommates with Bruce Arians at Virginia Tech. He's a minister there, and he taught theology at Oral Roberts, and so he's now a physical therapist, and I have a really good relationship with him, despite growing up, miles and miles apart from him.
It's so funny that Jay Glazer.
Glaze, Glaze creates all kinds of nonsense, you know.
Well, Glazer got me. You hear a lot of stories about twins, especially when they are identical. Were you and Ronde inseparable growing up, or did you try to distinguish yourselves at an early age?
No, we were indistinguishable, and probably according to my mom, we were insufferable because we were pains in the butt, always doing the same things, always getting in the same trouble, but never telling on one another because we were very quiet and shy. And my mom used to say we had this secret language, but it wasn't a language. We just kind of mumbled, and we could understand each other's mumbling. And if you were around us long enough, like we had a really close friend, his name was Chris Vaughn. By I don't know 4 or 5 years after hanging out with us, he could understand it as well. My mom was always clueless. I don't think we started to differentiate personality wise until we got into college. And you just start going your other way. We always did everything together, but we started doing our own individual things. I was into computer programming and nerding out at UVA, and Ronde was into the fun Greek scene and and having a good time. He did well at school too, but I think that's where we started to look and feel different when we got to college, even though we were still roommates for all 4 years at Virginia.
Were you guys competitive growing up with each other?
We were ridiculously competitive growing up. I think honestly, it's why we made it, because just think of the things that we would do. We ran track. We didn't do this. We never did the same thing. He was a hurdler. I was a jumper and a sprinter. And he would win, and I'd be like, "Oh man, I gotta win," or I'd win, and he'd be like, "Oh man, I gotta go win." And so we always competed. When we wrestled, even though we were the same weight, he would lose like 8 pounds, so he could wrestle a weight class down. And we just always like competed against each other's successes, and it drove us all the way through, and probably till the end of our NFL careers. You just always had a trusted voice to tell you what you needed to hear, and it made it interesting living this other life vicariously through my identical twin. So it's a unique experience being a twin.
Did you have any of those moments that you hear about with twins, knowing when the other is particularly stressed or has a traumatic event? Have you ever reached out or made a call to Ronde, prompted by a feeling or dream?
Yeah, I always think that's nonsense. Like that quantum entanglement that people want to assume because you came from the same egg and you're divided, and once particles are entangled together, then you know how they're going to react, even if it's across vast spaces and distances. I call BS on that. I think maybe if they're in the same room and a certain stimuli happens, that they'll react the same. But we never experienced that. But I could always tell just by watching what he was doing. I think it's only because we were both in the public eye. Like I could feel what emotion he was having based on what happened in the game he was playing down in Tampa, or he would do the same if he saw me. I don't know. For instance, I had a fumbling issue early in my career. Like he'd call me up, he'd know exactly what my mindset was, but it was only because he could experience it from afar. But we never had that like ESP thing, that extrasensory perception nonsense.
I'll ask a much less intelligent question, kind of in the same vein though. Did you guys ever do the thing where like the twins switch places? Like he didn't want to go to whatever, a math
Right.
class.
It's funny. We tried that one time at UVA, just not in school, but at practice. And so when we first got to UVA, we were the same size, about 178 or so. And ultimately, I got up to about 205 pounds as a running back. I needed the weight. But that first year, we looked exactly the same physically. And so I went and sat in his meeting room, and Rick Lance, his DB coach, was like, "Tiki, get the hell out of here. Yeah, I know you're not running." So it's interesting. Like once you spend some time with us, we start to look different, and I think our voices are a little bit different. Like our mannerisms are a little bit different. So if you know us well enough, you can tell us apart pretty easily.
Can you please describe your mom and how much she means to you?
Yeah, our mother, Geraldine Brickhouse Barber Hale, now because she's remarried, is our was our rock. She was everything. It's interesting because until I got older and started doing some things outside of football, like real estate, I had a partnership with Steve Ross, who does affordable housing. He has all that commercial rate stuff. He owns the Dolphins, but he did affordable housing for a lot of his career. And we did a partnership where we were acquiring a bunch of properties down in Southwest Virginia, which is in the town that I grew up in. And when we went down to visit, we looked at the properties. Like it was the first time I realized that we grew up in affordable housing. I didn't think of it that way. I thought it was just, a nice apartment complex, but it was really affordable housing. And my mom made an effort to not make us feel like we wanted for anything. Like I didn't feel like we didn't have anything. I know we didn't in retrospect, but I never felt like we didn't. And we needed new shoes for track and field. She'd find a way to get us new shoes. We needed XYZ piece of equipment for the for high school football. She'd find a way to get it. And it's because she worked so hard, right? 2 or 3 jobs, sometimes on the weekends. She had us working, mowing lawns and doing all kinds of things. We thought it was just fun and a great way to, I don't know, be active and do stuff. But she always found a way. And I think, the most important thing is that I was going to say forced, but that's the wrong word. She encouraged us to be great as students as well. And when we went to UVA, in 1993, she went back to college and got her master's degree in business administration. And she'd always be like, "Hey, I'm making straight A's in finance of whatever class she's taking. What are you guys doing?" And I'm like, "Mom, come on. Like, you don't got to challenge us all the time." But I think it was just to use a football term, Tim, you'll understand this, the culture of our house. It was excellence at everything. And failure wasn't an option, and just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, and eventually you'll find a way through.
After college, you were taken in the second round of the NFL draft by the New York Giants. You had a spectacular career there, but it was a little rocky at the beginning. When did you know deep down that you could not only play, but have an amazing career and hold 22 club records? Maybe I should have asked, when did people around you believe you could be great? When did you feel like the scales tilted in your favor?
It's an interesting question because I thought I could do it from the very beginning. Right when I got to the Giants, Rodney Hampton was our starting running back, and he got hurt in training camp. And my running back coach at the time came up to me and he said, "Teak, you're going to start." Jim Skipper was his name. We call him Skip. He said, "Skip," he said, "Teak, you're going to start. All you got to do is understand the playbook and understand the protections, and you're going to start this first game." So my very first game, I ended up starting against the Philadelphia Eagles. It was in Giants Stadium. It was amazing. I had a pretty good game, caught a big pass down the sideline. We ended up beating the Eagles. But then 3 weeks later against the New Orleans Saints, you'll remember we had that horrendous AstroTurf, kind of like what it used to be in Philly, just a concrete and a little layer of carpet. And I tore my PCL in the fourth game of my career. And I wasn't the same. And so for two years, I was in no man's land. So I started on this high, like I can do it, I can do it. And then I just kind of felt like I'm going to wash out of the league. It's why I started doing media, to be honest with you. I got into it during that little down part in my career. But it really came back around when Sean Payton took over as our offensive coordinator. And he had a familiarity with what Marshall Faulk was doing because he coached him at San Diego State in college. And so once he became our OC, and we're all watching the greatest show on turf with the Rams before they went back to Los Angeles, obviously. They were in St. Louis, and Marshall was catching balls out of the backfield and doing all these misdirection runs and taking advantage of his athleticism. Sean said, "I can do that with Tiki." And so in 2000, a couple of things happened. One, we drafted Ronde in the first round, Heisman Trophy winner, all-time leading rusher in college football history, and no one will ever get those records because he played forever and they gave it to him 35 times a game. So it challenged me, right? You're the running back on the team, and they draft a Heisman Trophy winner in the first round. That's a challenge to you. But you couple that being challenged with Sean Payton evolving our offense to fit a guy like me, and it just took off. I rushed for 1,000 yards for the first time in my career that season in 2000. We went to the Super Bowl, albeit in a bad losing effort to the Baltimore Ravens. But from then on, I was off and running.
Do you think it was obviously the coaching and the scheme and all that, but do you think you had a kind of a confidence being able to put up 1,000-yard season?
100%. Once you do it, you know you can do it. And so it's a matter of, it sounds like stupid, like obvious, but once you do something like that, you know you can do it. And especially if you believe in those guys in front of you and you start to develop a rapport. My success came because I had 5 good offensive linemen for the last 7 years of my career. Whether it was, early on, it was Lomas Brown, who was old at the time, and Glenn Parker, who was on those back-to-back Buffalo Bill teams that went to the Super Bowl and lost. But he came to us, so he has a unique honor of going to 4 Super Bowls and not winning any of them. But I had faith in those guys, and then we got younger with David Deal and Richie Soyberg and Sean O'Hara, who was our center, and Kareem McKenzie at right tackle, and we just had so much talent up front, and Chris Snee obviously at right guard, who was Coach Coughlin's son-in-law. We had so much talent, and we worked so well together that those last 3 years of my career, where I was 1,500 or 1,600 yards and 1,800 yards and 1,600 yards, it felt easy because we knew each other so well and we could trust each other.
During the 2000 season, you established yourself as the Giants' workhorse and NFL star. Then the Giants go to the Super Bowl. You lost the game to Baltimore, but you benefited from the publicity surrounding the game. You're handsome and intelligent, so you quickly become a media darling on a national scale, and a superstar was born.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tim. I think a lot of that happened because I lived in New York City. Unlike a lot of my teammates who lived in Jersey, I lived on the Upper East Side. And so like the power brokers of New York were in these same circles that I was walking around in. And I'd meet them and get opportunities simply because I was there. It wasn't a journey or a hustle to get into the city. I'd just walk out my door and I'd be wherever I need to be, Rockefeller Center or whatever. My book publisher was right there in Midtown as well. And so all of these opportunities were just waiting. And I was eager and opportunistic enough to take advantage of them. And I was one of those guys who never said no. So I got asked, I did a stint on WFAN, where I work now, doing the afternoon drive show. But it was in my off seasons, basically in the middle of the night. I'd go over there and work 10 to 2. I was working an overnight shift on WFAN, which led to doing a morning show on CBS local. And then I got a chance to work on Fox News for 3 or 4 years, doing Tuesdays with Tiki on Fox and Friends. And it just set up like all of these avenues to explore. And so you could say it was me being opportunistic, but it was also just me being right in the center of the media capital of the world. And I'm glad I took advantage of it.
Only a couple of years later, you call out Michael Strahan for sitting out with a contract dispute. Did you really call him greedy? He never reacted to it in the media. Did you two meet privately and hash things out between you? Or did you just assume that you were both adults and that was what the New York media was like? In other words, you can always count on the New York media to conflate a crust of bread into a 7-course meal.
No, I cooked this one myself. This was as advertised. This one was real. So that situation after the 2000, me, Jason Sehorn, and Michael Strahan were all up for free agents. And so it was going to be really hard to sign all of us. And we had just gone to the Super Bowl. And so in my mind, it was like, dude, let's put this thing back together. And so I remember saying something about, I forget exactly what I said, but it basically came across as Michael being greedy for the best money. And he wanted to beat me up. Like he seriously wanted to take me out for talking about his money. But interestingly, it was Jay Glazer that bridged it, that got us together and said, "You guys, look, we're both friends. We're all friends here. Just hash this thing out." And so Michael and I got together. We talked about it. I understood that I was wrong. I apologized to him. He got a big contract. Seahorn got a contract. I got my contract. It all got worked out. And we went on and kept the band together, so to speak. And now, however many years later that is, almost 25 years later, he's one of my best friends, Strahan, and he's done amazing things with his life in the media and everything else that he has going on. So that one was not conflated or blown up by the media. That was real.
Michael Strahan's also not a guy you want to have angry at you.
Right. But he's so gentle. He's not aggressive and mean like that. He is very gentle. I love that. I love him to death.
You continue your critique of sacrosanct persons. This time it was the head coach, and not just any head coach either. Tom Coughlin makes most head coaches seem like Sunday school teachers. And you said he was outcoached by then Carolina head coach John Fox. It took some hardware to say that. Was anyone encouraging you to speak your mind, because it's a brilliant precursor to a TV career?
No, it wasn't. No one was encouraging me, even though I think that was the prevailing thought of our locker room. And at that point in my career, that was that '05 season where I came off one of the best combined seasons of any running back in history at that time. I think it was the top 3 season at 1,800 yards rushing and 500 and something yards, 20 something yards receiving. And we lost the wild card round to the Carolina Panthers at home. And we all felt like, first of all, I didn't say we were just outcoached. I said we were outplayed, we were out hustled, we were also outcoached, but we were out everything in that game at home. And I felt like I was speaking the mind of our locker room. And there's context to it, because early on in that season, we knew that both of our owners were sick. Wellington Mara and Bob Tisch were likely going to pass away during some point during that year. And they ultimately both did. And at the beginning of the season, Coach Coughlin had said to us, "We are the team of record for Wellington Mara and Bob Tisch." And to me, that meant something. There was a reason that I had that great season in 2005, because we were the team of record, and the actions that we put on the field were indicative of the organization that both of those men had created. And so I rushed for 1,800 yards. I also rushed for 200 yards 3 times that season in important games. And so that season meant a lot to me personally. So when we go to the playoffs, hosting a wild card game against the Carolina Panthers, and we are completely lost against an inferior team, I was upset. And I'm sure a lot of the other guys were as well. So I said what I said. Tom pulled me aside and he's like yelled at me. He's like, "We'll watch the film," and blah, blah, blah. I was like, "Coach, you get emotional in moments like that. It is what it is. We're still going to have a great working relationship. Just like sometimes I suck at what I do. Sometimes coaches stink at what they do. And so it's just a reality of the sport. Sometimes you get out coached. A lot of times you get outplayed, but you turn around and you get better because of it."
What was that like when he first called you up? Were you nervous to talk to him, or you thought you knew it was going to be fine?
No, it's interesting. Like at that point, like I was such a vet. I was 29 years old. I'd been around, had a lot of like struggles that I'd fought my way through, had great success those last couple of seasons in '04 and '05. Like I was very confident and assured of myself. And I felt at that point, at the end of the season, it was my right to speak my mind. It created it wasn't a tension. It kind of created a clearing of the air of the situation in an odd way.
And then so one of my friends, his name is Will Blodgett. He married Carolyn Tish.
Oh,
And he said
nice.
to me, I told him that we were talking today, and he said, if it comes up, if Bob Tish, I didn't know, I didn't think there was a million years Bob Tish would come up, but he said, if Bob Tish comes up, ask Tiki how Bob Tish made him feel Jewish. I don't even know what that means, but I'd
All right.
love to hear the
So,
story.
so this is a, it's interesting because like, despite our massive age gap, like Bob was in his 70s when I was in my 20s, maybe even getting close to 80s. But we spent so much time together. He'd call me up and be like, "Hey, Teak, I'm going to this event. Um, it's with Governor Pataki. I want you to host it." And so he picks me up. We go to this event. I have my suit on, and I'm hosting an event for Governor Pataki, who it's odd because he's Republican and Bob is a staunch Democrat. And so I remember I asked him, I was like, "Why are we going to this, Bob?" And he's like, "Because he's going to win." So I was like, that's just smart. But he also like taught me how to engage and network in these rooms that I was alluding to earlier, like this circle of people who I didn't belong in, but I was there because I was a football star. And he's like, you got to be everywhere, but nowhere. So you go to the events, you say hello to the people that you need to, you have your impact, and then you leave and you go to the next one. And so I would do all this. We'd go to Feinstein's, which was in the Regency. He lived in the Regency, and Feinstein's was this jazz club in there, and we'd go in there and hang out and be, I don't know, executives from companies or philanthropic organizations that we would just have dinner or a drink with. And I never will forget how he made me feel. And the most poignant moment that I ever had with him was after he was diagnosed. He had a brain tumor, and he went down to Duke, I believe, to get a procedure done. And he came back, and he was, he shaved, he's bald. I take my then like 1 year old son, AJ, who's 22 now, at Princeton, playing football. But he was one, and we take him to his apartment at the Regency. And me and my then wife and AJ are in the living room. We're hanging out, and Bob comes in, and he has this like giant, this New York Giants pool ball, right? Like a billiards ball. And
Mhm.
he's like rolling it on the floor with AJ, just rolling it on the floor. And then he rolls it down the hallway, and then AJ will chase it. And then AJ will roll it back, and then he'll chase it. Like, this is Bob Tish, right? This is this ultra important, like influential man in New York City. And he's rolling a cue ball, a pool ball down the hall with my 1 year old. And so when he passed away, John, who I was also close with, his son, John Tish, asked me to speak at his memorial service. Now, this is like a big deal because it was the who's who of New York at Avery Fisher Hall. It's just massive. It's standing room only. And all of his colleagues and friends and peers and business associates are giving these speeches about who Bob was. And it's somber. It's like it felt like this is like a massive shiva. And so I remember asking John, I was like, "John, are you writing something?" And he's like, "I don't think so. I'm just going to go talk." And so I didn't write anything. But then I get there and everybody's like giving these prepared statements. I'm like, "Oh, shit, I'm going to be screwed here." And so I get up there and I just like, I have no idea what I'm going to say. And I just start talking about what he meant to the Giants, what he meant to me. And I finish and I'm saying, Bob, he accomplished all of these great things in business and philanthropy. And I said, but to me, Bob's greatest achievement was that he made this young black kid from Southwest Virginia feel like he was Jewish, and everybody started cracking up. And so it like brought this levity to this amazing tribute to Bob Tish. I think the interesting thing is that this furthered in my career because Jeff Zucker, who was head of NBC at the time, was in that audience. And when I retired from the NFL, and one of the things he said to me when I was deciding whether I was going to work at Fox or ABC or NBC, I ultimately chose NBC. He said, "I saw you command that room, and it was so impressive." And so it was one of the things that set me on. Even in his passing, Bob was helped setting me on a career path. Uh, like the reverence I have for the Tisch family and the importance in my life cannot be overstated. The same goes for the Mara family as well, who I was also very close with. I actually got a chance to see Wellington on his deathbed and thank him for making me a giant. Um, I, so when those two men passed away in the same year in 2005, it legitimately broke my heart. Um, I almost retired after that year, after 2005. But I said, you know what? Let's give it one more run. We were 10-6. I was like, let's try it again. And we went 8-8, made the playoffs. We lose to the Philadelphia Eagles in the playoffs in 2006. And I said, that's it. I'm good. I'm going to go do something else. So that's the made me feel Jewish story.
Yeah.
Regardless of your criticism, is it true that Coughlin helped you out by changing the way you held the ball, cutting your fumbles nearly in half by going from a horizontal grip to a vertical grip while running? I don't think I've ever heard anyone use a vertical grip before you made it popular.
Yeah, it is. And I credit is due to Gerald Ingram, who was Tom's running back coach. But it was emphasized by Tom. Tom was the one who made it a certain way. But it was Gerald who really taught me how to get it done. And I give as much as Tom and I didn't see eye to eye all the time. And I think it's because our personalities are just very different. Like I'm personable. I want to be, if I'm family with you, we're family. Uh, and he always kept players at arm's length. And it didn't vibe with me. We were great on game day. In fact, you can find videos of us always interacting and, and being coached, and like he was an unbelievable coach. I have so much respect for him. It was all that other stuff that was just kind of I don't know, a pain in the butt to deal with. But yes, because of his emphasis on ball security, it changed my career. I mean, one of the first things he said to me when he became the new head coach was, "I don't care how good you are. If you can't hold onto the football, you're not going to play. Period." And and so it forced me to change. And I give Gerald so much credit because every day I was walking around with the ball high and tight, 2 points, 4 points of contact. If you go into traffic, cover it with your off arm, just grab yourself. You go into contact, really compress with the ball centered in front of you and vertical, you're never going to lose it. And I think those last 3 years, I think I want to say I had 4 fumbles. Prior to that, I had like 50. So it worked, is the best way to put it.
I was playing football at that time at whatever youth football. I mean, at that time, it changed the game. I mean, every
Yeah.
single coach from high school, college, I never played pros, but high school,
Right.
college, everyone taught high and tight. And people would
Yep.
say, like, people would literally say, like, how Tiki does. They would show pictures of you holding the ball and all that. So,
Right.
yeah,
It's funny
it
because
changed the
I
game.
have some, right. I have some pictures that just photographers were able to take in real time during games. And like, I see myself going through contact and you can barely see the ball. So it's there, but it's so like wrapped. So my offhand is covering my on ball wrist and I'm just squeezing just tight and I'm running. I'm running in full stride. And as soon as I think contact is coming, it was always right here, which allowed me to kind of scoot through contact sometimes. It forced me to shorten my stride so my balance got better. So I became a more dynamic and explosive player simply because I was trying to protect the ball. When you're loose and wide open, it's easy to get knocked off, and then when you're falling to the ground, the ball is compromised. And so going to the ground, I always tell these running backs now when I see them because I call games now. I say the X will save you, right? Just keep that X right there. It'll save you from losing the football.
Is it also true that you didn't really lift weights until the last few years of your career?
I didn't lift weights properly or effectively. I just was like I'll lift weights type of thing. But I am I am I am so indebted to Joe Carini, who subsequently passed away. He had a heart attack 3 years ago. But Joe Carini was a power lifter that my manager found for me in Totowa, New Jersey. And he was one of those world's strongest man type guys. Was one of New Jersey's strongest men. I forget what his combined deadlift, power lift, and squat or deadlift, bench, and squat was, but it was ridiculous. But he made me strong and powerful in ways that I hadn't ever worked on before, and because of that, I never got hurt. So I got thicker, not too much heavier, but I just got muscle thickness and endurance from working out with him in this like in a super intense way. And I did it every off season. It's interesting because I think I think one of the reasons I knew I wanted to retire is that I didn't want to work out with him anymore. Like I didn't want to put in that kind of work in order to have the seasons that I was having. Because the reason I had those 3 or 4 great years is because I was working out with Joe. And then going into my last year, it was kind of like, I want to do this, but I really don't want to work out. It wasn't about the football. It was about the preparation for the season. For a guy who's normally, I mean, now naturally I sit at about 190 pounds. I played at 212. So that's 22, 24 pounds that like was unnaturally on me. And so when I stopped wanting to carry that is when I ultimately decided I wanted to retire.
Was he doing the same kind of lifts that you were doing, just with more intensity, or
No, it
was it
was
a totally different?
so much different. It was completely different. Obviously, it was the deadlifts and the powerlifting stuff, the snatches and the cleans, but he created this yoke. He would call it a yoke, which was basically a squat rack that as soon as you lifted it lifted off the ground, so you could walk with it. And so you'd squat. He'd put like 350 pounds on it, and you'd get under it and you'd squat it, and then you'd stand up and then you'd go for a walk. You'd go walk like, I don't know, 15, 20 yards with 350 pounds on your back. And you get there and you turn around and you squat it again, and you'd walk back. And so it was building all this functional strength that just, it made me feel so powerful with every movement that I had. I think it's why those last couple of years of my career, I was so good at breaking tackles. I got faster just because I was stronger and I was durable, and it allowed me to have great seasons and get 360 to 400 touches a year without breaking down.
You seem to get better with age, and the team leaned on you more and more with both carries and receptions. But please explain to people who see only numbers on the page what that means to your body.
Yeah, it's brutal to your body, Tim. Because you get hit every play almost. If you're running, you obviously get hit. But when we had pass plays, unless they weren't bringing pressure, you're taking blocks. You're hitting linebackers who are 30 pounds heavier than you. If you're not doing that, you're chipping on D ends. And then sometimes when you catch when you're not doing anything, you're out in a pass route. DBs or linebackers, they're trying to knock you down. They're trying to intimidate you. Now that's gone out of the league a little bit because we've gotten softer in the NFL. But I don't want to say back in my day, but back when we were playing, it was brutal, right? They tried to abuse the skill position players, and so I'd leave games and I feel like I was in a car wreck. And after a while, it's just like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to recover. Like most of my week was recovery. And especially after got to, let's say, 27 years old, it's massage and it's acupuncture, it's ART, which is active release technique. And like all these things that just get your body to feel normal so you can go break it down again. So it's glamorous, but there's a grind behind all that glamour.
Yeah, my dad used to always say when we were growing up and people would ask him, like, what was it like? He's like, it felt like being in multiple car accidents in the same
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
It's funny, exactly
Right.
what you said too, where he said most of his week was you play the game, then you basically rehab, then do 1 or 2 practices, then play a game again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It became like the mental challenge of the physical thing is like, it's fine. You just have to go do it. You have to go to rehab. You have to go get ice and stem and do the tubs, do all, but it's the mental side of it. It's like, man, I just don't feel good. Like I get up and I feel every step that I'm taking, and that messes with your mind, right? When you're not, you're not healthy, but you have to go be physical. It messes with your mind more than it does, the physicality of your body.
So during your 2006 season, you announced that you're going to retire at the end of that year. Did the Giants really offer you a 2-year, $50 million contract to not retire? And if you had to do it over again, would you have waited for the end of the season to announce your retirement?
Yeah, that's interesting. No, they did not offer me more money to stay. They really didn't even talk to me about it. They kind of knew that I was just short of my decision. It's interesting. People think that I announced that I was going to retire, a la, you know, I don't know. These guys do it now, and they get these farewell tours that everybody lauds them for. I didn't actually announce it. It got leaked by a journalist from the New York Times. His name was John Branch, and he was following me and my brother around on one of our book tour events. This was in 2006, and the reason he knew that is because I was taking these meetings with, I meant NBC and Fox and ABC, and he happened to be at a couple of them. And he at the end of our day of hanging out, he's like, "Teak, I think you're retiring. You have too many other things going on." And I said, "John, I'd rather you not report that, but I can't stop you from doing what you're going to do." And so he reported it, and it just kind of went wild from there. But it's funny because some of my teammates were like, "Man, really? You're going to retire? What about you? We still got a great season ahead of us." Because this was at the beginning of the year. This was like week 2. And I said, "No, I'm going to have a great season. It's not about that. It's just, I don't want to prepare to do this anymore." And so my teammates accepted it. They understood it. And you fast forward to 15 years from now, kind of everybody does it. Everybody announces that they're going to retire, and there's no problem with it. It was just, people weren't used to seeing athletes determine their own future. Like, they want to be the ones to tell an athlete, "You're done. I don't want to see you anymore." But I never wanted to be a guy to go out just hanging on. I wanted to go out on my own terms, and I think I did.
After you retired, you were working in TV mode when you took what was perceived as a swipe at both Coach Coughlin and Eli Manning. I think people didn't realize that your state of mind was no longer that of a teammate. And I love Eli, but your comments regarding Eli's leadership really weren't a big deal.
No, they weren't a big deal. And 99% of the people who reacted to it didn't see it. They reacted, including Eli, they reacted to the report of what I said. Because this was on Sunday Night Football. It was after a Sunday Night Football game in the preseason. Nobody was watching this. I promise you, nobody was watching this. But they heard about it. And I think it became a big deal because Eli responded to it. Now, it was also misunderstood. So one of the things that they was asked of me was, "What kind of leader is Eli?" And what I said came out, it came out wrong because of how it was interpreted. What I meant to say was, Eli is like, he's funny, how he wants everybody to have fun, like he's enjoyable. And so what I said was, he's comical with his leadership. But what I mean, and you now know this because you've seen Eli post career, like, he's always joking. Like, he's always got this dry, like, wit and quip that's making fun of you. And it's like, it's a great way to bring people together. And so how it was read is very different on how it was said. Right. And so there was no malice aforethought. I wasn't taking a shot at Eli. I thought Eli was great, especially those last 2 years that I was with him. His first year was tough, but he was a rookie and thrust in a tough situation. But those last 2 years, you could tell, because he was getting better every single year, that he was destined for really great things. And, with Tom, everybody knew that about Tom. It's not like I was saying I was pulling the peel off the onion. Tom was just a tough coach. It's just who he was.
For people who didn't hear it, what was the comment on Tom?
Just that one of the reasons that I wanted to stop playing is because it wasn't fun with him. It wasn't enjoyable. He wasn't a player's coach, and that's fine. I was also 31 years old. And so these days, running backs get kicked out of the league at that point. It just wasn't fun because Tom was not a fun coach. He didn't treat guys the right way. He subsequently did. He started a leadership council. Got all those guys on his side. I remember Sean O'Hara writing me at training camp that next year and was like, Teak, you're not going to believe this. We're going bowling. He's taking us bowling. And it was like, well, I guess he really has changed. So, it's people can evolve. And when Coach Coughlin evolved, he became a Super Bowl champion.
So you lived the life of a TV personality, and you met your now wife at the Today Show, and the media turns on you because you left your first wife, who was pregnant at the time, as if it is anyone's business outside of your home. Did you expect the backlash in the press to be so harsh?
I think the press sometimes doesn't take the effort or the time to understand people's situations. They comment on what they believe is their expectation, as if they have a moral high ground to understand everything that's going on in an individual or an individual's family's life. And so I've never really talked about my relationship with my ex-wife, primarily because she's the mother of 4 of my kids, and I will never want my kids to look at her a certain way because of something I said. And I'll leave it at that. I have a phenomenal wife in Tracy. I have 2 beautiful kids with her, and it was unfair how they treated her.
In 2011, you tried to come back to the NFL. You ended up with the Miami Dolphins at training camp. I went through the same emotions as a broadcaster, but I did not actually do it. Even now, in the state I'm in, I have dreams at night where I am playing with the Falcons again. So what was it like?
It's interesting because I have those dreams too, that I'm still playing with the Giants. It's so ingrained in your mind. Like it was such a big part of our lives that it's never going to go away. That happened and came about because of my relationship that I was alluding to with Steve Ross in affordable housing. And so because I had a business relationship right after I graduated, I had a familiar relationship with him as well. And so in 2011, when I'm not doing anything, I've just gone through a divorce, and I'm trying to find something to get me out of this depressive state that I'm in. And football is what I know. And so I went back and started working out with Joe Carini, and I got strong again. And I felt powerful. I felt like I could do it. And I went down for a workout. I didn't actually go to camp. I went down for a workout with the Dolphins. And 3 or 4 days later, the NFL locked out the players. And so I never got a real chance to catch on with the team. And ultimately, it was for the best because I ended up 2 things. One, starting a business called Thusio, which has done very well. And then secondly, I started working for CBS Sports Radio, which is the same family as WFAN. And so now here I am 12 years later hosting the afternoon drive show on WFAN. And it all started that 2011 fall when I didn't didn't get a chance to catch on with an NFL team trying to make a comeback. So the best thing I can say about it is that it got me out of sitting on my couch doing nothing.
What do you think if there was no lockout? You think you would have had a good year, or do you think
I'm positive I would have had a good year. I know that I still had it. It would have been an issue of whether or not my body would have held up, because at that point I was 34, 35, 35 years old. So it would have been hard, but what else was I doing? So give it a shot. Luckily it worked out.
It would have been a fun storyline, but it all worked out. All happened for a reason.
Right. Exactly right.
Tiki, looking back on your childhood with your mom working 3 jobs to support you guys, I would be surprised if you had any time to go to church, but maybe I'm wrong. If not, did you happen to pick up Christianity along the way? I only say it because it has been a lifesaver for me, and I encourage everyone to look into it. That's why I said it's not anyone's business 2 questions ago, because Jesus said, "Judge not, lest ye be judged."
That's exactly right. And of course we went to church, Maple Street Baptist Church, every Sunday. My mother was extraordinarily religious and pious and pushed it on us. But she was also very fair with us. Like, she took us to different types of churches, and wanted us to make the decision about what our faith was going to be. I mentioned earlier about my relationship with Bob Tish, and making me feel like I was Jewish. I have a great appreciation for Judaism. I've been to Israel multiple times, once to run a marathon, but once just to explore and see that country. And so I understand what the part that religion plays in people's lives, and I have faith as well. And so I know that there is a higher power that is maybe not directing, but influencing the good things that happen in our lives.
Beautiful. Can you please tell us about your books for kids and what inspired you to get into that?
Yeah, that was an awesome opportunity. And it happened because my editor, or our editor, me and Ronde's editor at Simon and Schuster, her name is Paula Wiseman, had a son who's was a big Giant fan. And her mom, Paula, was trying to find an idea for books. And so her son said, "Why don't you have Tiki write a book?" And so she reached out to us and asked if we'd be interested. And fortunately, both Ronde and I had just had our second kids. So my second son, Chasen, his second daughter, Yamil, were born about a year before we started writing those books. And for us, it became an avenue to just tell stories that we could pass down to our kids. And so we wrote 3 children's books to start, and uh, they sold unbelievably well. I think in part because they were books for boys about sports. A lot of books back then weren't written specifically for boys about sports, and also the one of the primary characters in the book was our mother. And so who buys books? Moms, right? And so we happened upon this little niche that was underserved, and it precipitated into 3 children's books, as I mentioned, and then 9 chapter books that we wrote for kids as they got a little bit older and started reading, more advanced books. And it was amazing, an awesome journey to be an author like that, because I still get, I don't know, moms coming up from me. Their kids are grown now, and they'll say, "I can't believe that, you got my son reading because of your books." In fact, you guys remember Coach Rule he used to
Sure.
coach for the Panthers, and now he's in Nebraska.
Nebraska.
I
Yeah.
did one of his first games, and after we did our production meeting, he came up to me and gave me this big hug, and he was tearing up a little bit. He said, I'm glad I get a chance to meet you and say thank you, because one of his sons wouldn't read, had a reading disability. And the reason he started reading was because of our children's books. And so it was like you don't realize the impact that you have until you realize the impact that you have. And so for us, it was just something to pass down stories to our kids, but it really has affected a lot of people's lives in ways that we can't even understand.
Tiki, I was going to ask you that was going to be one of my questions I had. Is you've done a lot of stuff outside of football, with you mentioned Thuzio, an author,
Right.
media. What's been your favorite? Has it been the books?
I don't. It's hard to pick one, because I've just had these random experiences that make me sometimes like say, why am I so blessed? Right? Why am I here? I've had lunch with Condoleezza Rice when she was Secretary of State. I got invited to Israel the first time with Shimon Peres, who was the premier at the time. It was in a very interesting state of the world affairs at that point, because of their occupation of the West Bank, and they were trying to disengage from the West Bank, and there were protests going on. And I visited the Knesset, and I'm sitting there, and it's like, what am I doing here? Why am I in Israeli parliament with the premier of this country? But I think the most fulfilling thing that I've done is I've run 15 marathons and raised money for different charities. It started with CC Sabathia's charity Pitch In Foundation. And then I ran some for Teen for Kids, and then for an autism organization called Culture City. And now I work with the foundation, the Achilles Foundation, which is disabled either veterans or individuals who are looking to compete in events. And it's just it's fulfilling to use an athleticism that's God given to me and make something good happen because of it.
Now on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
The happiest moment of my life was seeing my oldest son be born, AJ Barber.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
I think going through a divorce was the biggest adversity I ever had to overcome. And I was blessed because my second wife, Tracy, was a rock, and she still is in my life.
What are you most excited about?
I'm most excited about not knowing what the future holds. I'm almost 50, but I still feel like I have so many things to do.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
I try to live I get often asked, like, what do you want your legacy to be? And I've settled on an easy answer. I just want people to remember me as someone who made them feel good.
Could you please tell us about your wife and kids? I'm encouraging you to brag.
Oh yeah, no, my family's amazing. So I have 6 kids. My oldest is 22. AJ, he's playing football at Princeton, and he's in a senior year. I have a 20-year-old Chasen, who is just getting extensive playing time at Brown. He's a junior season. I have 14-year-old twins who are Greenwich, and they're awesome. I think they're going to be really good track athletes. I have a 10-year-old with my second wife, Brooklyn. Ella and Riley, by the way, are my twins. I have a 10-year-old Brooklyn who is a, a, I would say a gymnast, but she's more of because she can do all the gymnastic stuff, but she does it in cheer, and she's amazing. She puts me in awe with the things that she does. And then my youngest is Tegan, who is 8, and I love her to death because all she wants to do is cuddle with me. And she's also in cheer, but I don't want her to grow up, because once she does, then I'm going to really feel old. And then my wife is amazing. Tracy she's the rock of our family. She works in philanthropy with currently United Way of Northern New Jersey, doing stuff for Alice families, asset limited, income constrained, employed. It's those families that are trying to make ends meet. They're fully employed, but they live at or around the poverty level. And so when I do some of these game shows over the last couple of years, I'm helping raise money for Alice families. So, and my mom was an Alice mom, even though we didn't know it at the time. So I have
Awesome.
I have a great group around me.
And then I'm going to put you on the spot here with the last question. The goal of the podcast was we didn't want it to be about just football or just ALS or just being an author, because my dad's had a lot of different things he's done in his life. So we ask at the end of every episode, who are a couple of people that you know personally that you think we should try to get on the podcast?
That's a good question. I think so. It's not just football that you're looking for. It's not.
Could be anyway. It can be football, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Have you had Strahan?
No, we haven't had Strahan.
His life is amazing, especially with what he's gone through with his daughter over the last year or so. She had cancer, and she finally beat it. But he is compelling, like really compelling. His life. That would be the one I would say. I would throw some of my Broadway friends out there, but they're different. That's the other thing that I also really loved doing was I had a 7-week stint in Kinky Boots, and it was unbelievable, like fulfilling and emotional and meaningful. So
you want to talk about different from playing for the Giants to
very different. Yeah. So Callum Francis, he's a Broadway actor. He might be in Australia right now, but sometimes he's here performing. But he was Lola in Kinky Boots when I was performing. His life is amazing.
Those are 2 good ones.
Yeah.
Tiki Barber, it has been a great pleasure talking with you. You have had a fascinating life and accomplished so many things. Thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
Tim, it is my pleasure. I am honored, and God bless you and your family.
Yeah, thank you, Tiki. It's been really cool. I was I didn't want to say this at the beginning and think you were going to get softball questions, but I was a big fan watching you growing up too. So it's really cool to
Oh, thank you. I
talk to you
appreciate
now
it.
and hear all the stuff and the
Thank you.
stuff you do now in the media, obviously too. But
Oh yeah, I have fun now. My job is easy now.
yeah, thanks so much for doing this.
You're welcome, guys. You guys have a great one. And Tim, blessings.
Barkley Damon LLP is proud to be the law firm sponsor of Tim Green's podcast, Nothing Left Unsaid. For more on Barkley Damon's team of nearly 300 attorneys with regional, national, and global reach from our offices across the northeastern U.S., Washington, D.C., and Toronto, go to barclaydamon.com. I want to thank my partners at Barkley Damon for supporting this podcast, and of course 11 Labs for their incredible technology. If you liked today's episode, a free way to support the podcast is to subscribe and share it with friends. Thank you. A significant amount of these sponsorships go to tackleals.com. For cutting-edge ALS research at Massachusetts General Hospital, if you want to make a contribution, go to tackleals.com.